Daf Yomi Tractate Horayot, page 3, top of the page, with the word Zot Torah Olahi. Zot Torah Olahi Ha'elu Shlosh Kamiluti. This is the law of the burnt offering. It is that which goes up on its pyre on the altar. Leviticus 6:2. These are three exclusionary terms: this, the burnt offering, and it is, which serve to exclude three offerings concerning which the halacha is that even if they are placed on the altar, they are subsequently removed. A burnt offering slaughtered at night, a burnt offering whose blood was spilled before it was sprinkled, and a burnt offering whose blood was taken outside the courtyard. Apparently, it is Rabbi Yehuda who interprets multiple exclusionary terms. V'i ba'itema adayin ani omer lo matzit mok matla ki Rabbi Yehuda dikitani רוב קהל שחטו בית דין מבין על ידיהן פר. ואי רבי יהודה אמר ציבורו דמייטה. בית דין לא. לצדן רבי יהודה אומר 7 שבטים שחטו מבין 7 פרים. And if you wish, you could say that proof for the attribution of the Horayot may be cited from the second Horayot, which begins with the phrase, "Still I say." You cannot interpret that Braita in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. As the Braita teaches, one might have thought that each member of the majority of the congregation that sinned, based on the ruling of a court, is exempt from liability to bring an offering for his unwitting transgression, as the court brings a bull for an unwitting communal sin on the basis of their transgression. And if this Braita is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, didn't he say it is the congregation that brings the bull as an offering and not the court? As we learned in a Mishnah 5a, that Rabbi Yehuda says 7 tribes that sinned bring 7 bulls. The tribe to bring the offerings, not the court. Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel, Zo Divrei Rabbi Meir, Avu Chachamim Oimerim, Yochid Shos B'Chayras Beis Din Chayu, Mai Rabbi Meir Umay Rabbonon Yitanya, Hoi Hu Yosu, Rabbi Meir Poter, V'Chachamim Mechayivim. Up to this point, the Gemara explains the Mishnah in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda and contrary to the opinion of the rabbis who disagree with him. And Rav Nachman says that Shmuel says the Mishnah is the statement of Rabbi Meir, but the rabbis say an individual who performed a transgression on the basis of the ruling of the court is liable. The Gemara asks, what is the opinion of Rabbi Meir? And what is the opinion of the rabbis to which Shmuel referred? It is as is taught in a Braita. If the court issued a ruling and the judges performed a transgression on the basis of that ruling, Rabbi Meir deems them exempt, and the rabbis deem them liable. Man asu ilem beit din, ma'itay min rabbanim hayvi. ויותני יוכל הויר בזדין ועשו בזדין יוכל נהיו חייבים תמד לא אמר הקהל ועשו מעשה תלוי בקהל והוראה תלויה בבית דין. The Gemara asks who performed the transgression. If we say that it is the members of the court who performed the transgression, what is the reasoning of the rabbis who deem him liable? But isn't it taught in Braita? One might have thought that if the court issued a ruling and the members of the court performed the transgression, one might have thought that they would be liable to bring a bull for an unwitting communal sin. The verse states, with regard to that bull, and the matter is hidden from the eyes of the congregation, and they performed. Leviticus 4:13. From which it is derived that the action is dependent on the congregation and the ruling is dependent on the court. And by the way, 14 is a number on the PL 89 calendar here. And we got Leviticus 4:13, which is really interesting. And we go weiter. Ela hoyu bezdin v'yasu roko al my time and I made the bottom. Ela lav hoyu bezdin v'yasu miyad kahal uva ha-kamiflegi mar savar yachid shasa Yehoshua bedin patur umar savar yachid shasa v'vaz bezdin chayot. Rather, the case in the Braita is where the court issued a ruling and the majority of the congregation performed a transgression on the basis of that ruling. If so, what is the reasoning of Rabbi Meir, who deems them exempt? Rather, is it not referring to a case where the court issued a ruling and a minority of the congregation performed a transgression on the basis of that ruling? And it is with regard to this matter that the Tanaim disagree. One sage, Rabbi Meir, holds an individual who performed a transgression on the basis of the ruling of the court is exempt, and one sage, meaning the rabbis, holds an individual who performed a transgression on the basis of the ruling of the court is liable. The Mishnah, which states that an individual who performed a transgression on the basis of a ruling of the court is exempt, it is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Amarav Papa, the Chuliam Yachishas, and Horayot Bezdin Pato. Ela Bedim Shale, Mashlo Atzivo Kamivli. Rav Papa said there is no proof that the dispute between Rabbi Meir and the rabbis relates to the Mishnah, as their dispute can be understood differently. Perhaps everyone agrees. Where were we? The Mishnah, which states that an individual who performs a transgression on the basis of ruling of the court is exempt, is in according to the opinion of Rabbi Meir. I think that's where we were. Rather, the case in the Braita. One sage, the rabbis, holds an individual performing a transgression on the basis of a ruling of the court is liable. The Mishnah, which states that an individual who performs a transgression on the basis of a ruling of the court is exempt, is in accordance with Rabbi Meir. Yes, yeah. Rav Papa said. Hope I didn't skip any. If I skipped some, then just see Art Scroll. Look at the Art Scroll chapter, Horayot for the English, and you can fill that in. Rav Papa, the Chuliam Yachid Shasa Bedin Pato. This is not Art Scroll. This is actually, I think, Sansino, because Safari uses Sansino, I'm pretty sure. But anyway, Rav Papa said there is no proof that the dispute between Rabbi Meir and the rabbis relates to the Mishnah, as their dispute can be understood differently. Perhaps everyone agrees that an individual who performed a transgression on the basis of the ruling of the court is exempt. Rather, the Tanaim disagree with regard to whether the members of the court combine with the members of the congregation to complete a majority of the congregation. The members of the congregation who sinned constitute less than a majority. When the judges of the court who sinned are added to that minority, the total of people who sinned constitute a majority. He explains one sage, the rabbis holds. The members of the court combine with the members of the congregation to complete a majority of the congregation. And one sage, Rabbi Meir, holds, the members of the court do not combine with the members of the congregation to complete a majority of the congregation. Therefore, those who sinned on the basis of the ruling of the court constitute less than a majority, and the court is exempt from liability to bring an offering. The Mishnah is not only in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir, as in the case of the Mishnah, but even the rabbis agree. Uman chachamim Rabbi Shimon hidam hatzibur ma'isi ubezdin ma'isi. And if you wish, say instead that the dispute between Rabbi Meir and the rabbis is in a case where the court issued a ruling and a majority of the congregation performed a transgression on the basis of that ruling. And everyone agrees that the court is liable to bring a bull as an offering for an unwitting communal sin, par ha'elem davar, I think this is called. Rabbi Meir deems the members of the congregation exempt from bringing an offering. And who are the rabbis who deem them liable to bring an offering? It is Rabbi Shimon, who said the congregation brings an offering and the court brings an offering. Vi bait ema shevet shasa behoyros bezdino uman chachamim Rabbi Yehuda hidetani shevet shasa behoyros bezdino ama shevet chayav oto shevet chayav. Okay. And if you wish, say instead that the dispute between Rabbi Meir and the rabbis is in the case of a tribe that performed a transgression on the basis of the ruling of its tribal court. Rabbi Meir holds that there is no liability to bring a bull as an offering for an unwitting communal sin for a ruling issued by a tribal court. Therefore, he deems the court exempt from bringing an offering. And who are the rabbis who deem the tribal court liable to bring an offering? It is Rabbi Yehuda, as it is taught in a Braita. In the case of a tribe that perform, I'm not sure what it means by who are the rabbis. It's Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda is one person, he's not rabbis. Okay, whatever. As taught in Braita, in the case of a tribe that performed this transgression, on the basis of the ruling of its tribal court, the tribe is liable. כגון שחטו שישה תהברו של הקהל אישי ואף על פי שנערו של קהל ומתיתי מעני רבי שמעון בן עזרי. And if you wish, say instead that the dispute between Rabbi Meir and the rabbis is in a case where 6 of the 12 tribes sinned, and although they do not constitute a majority of the number of the tribes, in terms of population, they constitute a majority of the congregation. Or 7 tribes sinned, and even though in terms of population, they are not a majority of the congregation, they constitute a majority of the tribes. And whose opinion is expressed in the Braita as the opinion of the rabbis? It is the opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Titania, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, Emel Mishmoi, Chatu Shisha, Enu Shel Kal Shiva, Fal Pishe, Naruba Shel Kal. As this is as it is taught in Braita, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says, in the name of Rabbi Meir, if 6 tribes sinned, and in terms of population they are a majority of the congregation, or if 7 tribes sinned, even though in terms of population they are not a majority of the congregation, they are liable. All these alternative understandings of the dispute between Rabbi Meir and the rabbis led to the conclusion that there is no proof for the statement of Rav Nachman in the name of Shmuel that the Mishnah is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Shenemar, Vayas Shlomo be'etahi et hachag b'chol Yisrael imo, kahal gadol, milvo chamat ad nachal Mitzrayim, lifnei Adonai Eloheinu shivat yamim, v'shivat yamim arba'a asar yom. Mechti, k'tiv b'chol Yisrael amo, kahal gadol milvo chamat ad nachal Mitzrayim, lama li Shmaruna Hanihu Ikri Kahal Aval Hanach Lo Ikri Kahal. Rav Asi says, and with regard to the definition of the majority that establishes liability for performance of a transgression on the basis of the ruling of a court, follow the majority of the residents of Eretz Yisrael, as it is stated, and Solomon held the feast at that time, and all Israel with him, a great congregation, from the entrance of Hamath until the brook of Egypt, before the Lord our God, 7 days and 7 days, 14 days. 1 Kings 8:65. The Gemara clarifies the words of this verse. Since it is written, and all Israel with him, why do I need to add a great congregation from the entrance of Hamath until the brook of Egypt? To conclude from it, it is these residents of Eretz Yisrael who are characterized as a congregation, but those who reside outside Eretz Yisrael are not characterized as a congregation. Okay. The Gemara continues defining the majority that establishes liability. It is obvious that the case of when those who performed a transgression on the basis of the ruling of the court were numerous, meaning they constituted a majority and their percentage diminished. For example, if some sinners died and they now constitute a minority of the congregation, this is the dispute between Rabbi Shimon and the rabbis who disagree in Mishnah 10b with regard to an anointed high priest or a king who performed an unwitting transgression before assuming his position. The rabbis hold, since they were laymen when they sinned, they are liable to bring the offering of a layman. Rabbi Shimon holds, if they became aware of their transgression while still laymen, they bring the offering of a layman. If they became aware of their transgression after they assumed their positions, they're exempt. Accordingly, in the case of a majority whose number diminished, the rabbis hold that since it was a majority that sinned, they bring an offering. Rabbi Shimon holds that it depends on their status when they became aware they had unwittingly sinned. Me'utin sabamai, me'utin b'nesabamai, die. Me'utin sabamai. Mi pligi Rabbi Shimon Rabbi Shimon Dazzle, Basar Yudiyam Mechayev, Bam Azli, Basar Chatos, Patri, brackets Allah, Mai. If those who performed the transgression on the basis of the ruling of the court were few, they constituted, meaning if they constituted a minority and the percentage increased. For example, if some non-sinners died and the sinners now constitute a majority of the congregation, what is the halacha? Do Rabbi Shimon and the rabbis disagree with regard to this matter as well? That would mean that Rabbi Shimon, who follows the status at the time of awareness, deems the court liable, and the rabbis, who follow the status at the time of the transgression, deem the court exempt. Or do they not disagree? What is the conclusion? B'tizbaram, Emor Dishmat Lei Rabbi Shimon, Diazul Af Basar Yadiyah. In brackets it says Heichi Dahavi Yediyah Chata B'Chil Yediyah D'Lo Chata B'Shamasei. And you can understand that this case is contingent on the dispute between Rabbi Shimon and the rabbis. And can you understand that this case is contingent on the dispute between Rabbi Shimon and the rabbis? Say that you heard that Rabbi Shimon follows the status at the time of awareness as well, meaning in a case where both the awareness and the transgression were in a period of liability, either liability as a layman or liability as a king, or as an anointed high priest, the sinner is liable to bring an offering. But in a case where the awareness was during a period of liability, but the transgression was not, did you hear Rabbi Shimon say the court is liable? The Gemara clarifies, as if it is so that Rabbi Shimon holds that the period of awareness is the sole determining factor, let the high priest and the king bring an offering according to their present status. If they became aware of their transgression after assuming their positions, let them bring the offering appropriate for the high priest or king. Why then does Rabbi Shimon say that in that case they're exempt? Rather, apparently Rabbi Shimon requires that both the transgression and the awareness take place in the period of liability. There is no resolution for the dilemma that was raised, but it doesn't result in teku. Interesting. כיוון דשתי ידיעות ניתנו לא מצטרף. או דילמה כיוון דאידי ואידי חלק מצטרף. A dilemma was raised before the sages. If the court issued a ruling that forbidden fat is permitted, and a minority of the congregation performed the transgression of eating forbidden fat on the basis of that ruling, and the court reversed their decision, and then reversed the decision again, and issued a ruling that forbidden fat is permitted, and a different minority of the congregation performed the transgression, what is the halacha? The Gemara elaborates, is it that since there are two disparate experiences of awareness, the first minority does not combine with the second minority, even though the two minorities together would constitute a majority, or perhaps since both this transgression and that transgression are the same, eating forbidden fat, the first minority combines with the second minority, and the two minorities together constitute a majority. ואם תמצא לומר, כיוון דאידי ואידיך חלב ומצטרף, מיעוט בחלב שעל גבי הקיבה, ומיעוט בחלב שעל גבי דקים מהו. הכא ודאי כיוון דבטרם קרא קאתי, לא מצטרף או דילמה כיוון the who Mr. And if you say in that case, since both this transgression and that transgression are the same, eating forbidden fat, the first minority combines with the second minority, then there is another dilemma. In the case where majority performed excuse me, the first minority combines with the second minority, there is another dilemma. In the case where the minority performed a transgression on the basis of the first ruling of the court and ate forbidden fat, that is upon the maw, and the minority performed a transgression on the basis of the second ruling of the court and ate forbidden fat as upon the small intestine, what is the halacha? The Gemara elaborates here, certainly since these transgressions come from two different verses, the first minority does not combine with the second minority, or perhaps, since both this transgression and that transgression are the same. Eating forbidden fat, the first minority combines with the second minority, and the two minorities together constitute a majority. ואם תמצא לומר שם חלב ומצטרף, מי בחלב ומי. Hachabadai kevan distrei. So in brackets it says kevan de ein isurin shave. Lo mistarev odim lo kevan de isurin shave de korbanan shave mistarev. And if you say, in that case, it is the name of forbidden fat that they both have in common, and the first minority combines with the second minority, then there is another dilemma. In the case where a minority performed a transgression on the basis of the first ruling of the court in a forbidden fat, and a majority performed a transgression on the basis of the second ruling of the court, and ate forbidden blood, what is the halacha? The Gemara elaborates here. Certainly there are two distinct prohibitions, and since the nature of their prohibition is not identical, the first minority does not combine with the second minority, or perhaps, since their offerings are identical, as one is liable to bring a sin offering for unwitting violation of either of these prohibitions, the first minority combines with the second minority. Ve'im timtzeh lomar kevan d'isurin shaveh v'korbanan shaveh mistarev mi'evrei le'mi'evavod zareh mahu. Hacham vadai ein isurin shaveh ve'en korbanan shaveh oidin ma kevan de'idi be'idi graitu mistarev teku. This should be like the 200 and something teku, 203rd, 202nd, something like that, around there. And if you say in that case, since their offerings are identical, the first minority combines with the second minority, then there is another dilemma. In a case where a minority performed a transgression on the basis of the first ruling of the court and ate forbidden fat, and a minority performed a transgression on the basis of the second ruling of the court and engaged in idol worship, was the halacha. Here, certainly neither are their prohibitions identical, nor are their offerings identical, because an individual who unwittingly engages in idol worship may bring only a female goat for atonement. Therefore, the first minority does not combine with the second minority. Or perhaps, since for both this transgression and that transgression, one is liable to receive excision in the world to come, if he performs it intentionally, the first minority combines with the second minority. The Gemara concludes, Teku, the dilemma shall stand unresolved. Okay? Iboilahu. Hoyu bezin shekele mutavas umiyudekal umeisoto bezdin bema betin acher b'chazu v'haru v'yasu miyudacher. A dilemma was raised before the sages. If a court issued a ruling that forbidden fat is permitted, and a minority of the congregation performed the transgression of eating forbidden fat on the basis of that ruling, and the members of that court died, and another court stood in their place and again issued the same ruling that forbidden fat is permitted, and a different minority performed the transgression of eating forbidden fat on the basis of that ruling. What's the halacha? Aliba de ban the Amr Beit Din Ma'ati Lo Tiboilach. Do Halifni Ella Kitiboilach. Aliba de Man de Amar. Sibur Maisi Mai Sibur Hakai Nafri B. O Dilma in brackets Dia Dahu Beit Din Dahu Binan Teku. The Gemara elaborates, according to the opinion that one who said that only the court brings the offering, do not raise the dilemma, and those judges who issued the original ruling, on the basis of which the minority performed a transgression are no longer alive. Rather, when should you raise the dilemma? Raise it according to the opinion of the one who said the congregation brings the offering. The Gemara elaborates that the congregation exists as together the two minorities constitute a majority of the congregation who performed the transgression. Okay, so you're dealing with a group of people who went against the Bet Din. And another Bet Din, and this Bet Din died, and this next Bet Din says permitted. So what's the situation? Or perhaps, now we're on top of 3b, Dilma, Yediyah, in brackets, Tahu Bet Din, or perhaps for liability require the awareness of the same court that issued the ruling, and that court no longer exists. The Gemara concludes the dilemma shall stand unresolved. Wow. Next, here on 3b, we'll take a little brief interlude and be back after the interlude. Continuing on page 3b, Amar Rabbi Yonatan, Me'ash Yashul Horayot, Ein Chayav En Ashiyahu Kula, Shene'emar Ve'im Kol Adat Yisrael Yishgu, Ad Sheyishgu Kulan, in brackets it says Ad Shetifshot Hora'ah V'chol Adat Yisrael. Amar Rav Huna Bered Rav Hoshaya, Hachinai Mistabrad V'chol Torah Kula, Kaima Lan Rubo Kekulo. Yehacha Ketiv Kol Ha'ida, Ho'id V'kach Afilu Hei Meyo. Rabbi Yonatan says, even in the case of 100 judges who convened to issue a ruling and erred, they are not liable to bring an offering unless they all issue that ruling, as it is stated with regard to liability to bring the offering, and if the entire assembly of Israel shall act unwittingly. Leviticus 4:13. From the term entire it is derived that the judges are not liable until they all act unwittingly, and the ruling must disseminate and be adopted through the entire assembly of Israel, meaning the Sanhedrin. Rav Huna, son of Rav Hoshaya, said, so too it is reasonable to conclude this, as throughout the entire Torah we maintain the principle. The legal status of the majority of an entity is considered like all of that entity, and here the entire assembly is written. Since it is so, a majority does not suffice. Even if they are 100 judges, they are liable only if the erroneous ruling was unanimous. Tanan, Hoy hu beis din, v'yodeh echad ben shitau, o talmid v'hoy lihoyro, v'holav yos al piem ben shasu v'yos hayuhen, ben shasu v'yos achayim, ובין שלא עשו ועשה, הרי זה חייב, מפני שלא תלה בבית דין. We learned in the Mishnah if the court ruled that ruling, and one of the judges knew that they erred, despite the fact that the majority ruled against his opinion, or if he was a student and was qualified to issue halachic rulings, and that judge or student proceeded and performed that transgression on the basis of the court's ruling, then whether the judges performed the transgression and he performed it with them, or whether the judges performed the transgression, he performed it after them, or whether the judges did not perform the transgression and he performed it alone, in all these cases, the judge or the student is liable to bring an offering. This is due to the fact that he did not associate his action with the ruling of the court. The Gemara notes that one may infer, it is this judge or student, it is this judge or student who is liable, but another who acts on the basis of the ruling of the court is exempt. But why would he be exempt? The ruling is not completed if it is not unanimous. The Gemara answers, what are we dealing with here? We are dealing with a case where the one dissenting judge among them bowed his head and indicated his agreement with the remaining judges. Tashima hoiru bezdin yodachad mehen shitau v'walehen toinatem harei elu beturim tamad v'walehen toinatem de beturim ha shetek mishtak חייבים לגמרי להוראה והמים ועל ההוראה כולן אמרי הכת נמי כגון שיחקים בראשו. The Gemara suggests coming here proof from a Mishnah 4b. If the court issues a ruling and one of the judges knew that they erred and he says to them, you're mistaken, they are exempt. One may infer the reason that they are exempt is that the judge said to them, you are mistaken, but if he was silent, they are liable, and the ruling is complete. And why, according to Rabbi Yonatan, would they be liable? But isn't it so that not all of them issued the same ruling? The sages say, in response, so to here, it is a case where the dissenting judge bowed his head. May Sivrav Meshar Shia, Sam Flavosenu, Al Divrei Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, ועל דברי רבי אלעזר ורבי צדוק שהיו אומרים אין גויסן גזירו על הציבור אלא אם כן רוב הציבור יכולים לעמוד בו. Rabbi Misharshi raises an objection to the statement of Rabbi Yonatan from a Braita. Our sages relied on the statement of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, on the statement of Rabbi Elazar, son of Rabbi Tzadok, who would say, one does not issue a decree upon the congregation unless the majority of the congregation is able to withstand it. The Amar Rav Ada bar Abba Maikra b'Me'era Atem Ne'arim V'Oti Atem Kovim Hagoy Kulo V'Hacha Ketiv Hagoy Kulo V'Ruba Kekula Dami Tiyufta de Rabbi Yochanan in brackets is Yonatan Tiyuvta. And Rav Ada bar Abba said, what is the verse from which this principle is derived? It is derived from the verse with the curse, you are cursed, yet you rob me, the entire nation. Malachi 3:9. The verse is referring to the oath taken by the entire people to observe the halachot of tithes, and they violated those halachot. But here it is written, the entire congregation, the entire nation, and yet Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel and Rabbi Elazar, son of Rabbi Tzadok, relied on this verse to derive that the legal status of the majority of an entity is like that of the entire entity. And therefore, if a majority of the congregation can withstand the decree of the court, the court may issue it. Gemara concludes the refutation of the opinion of Rabbi Yonatan is indeed a conclusive refutation. Ve'ela, my kol hadat de'amar Rachmana, הכי כמה היא עיקר כולם הביאה הוראה ואילה לא הביאה הוראה. The Gemara asks, rather, now that Rabbi Yonatan's opinion has been refuted, What is derived from the phrase, the entire assembly, at the merciful one states? This is what it is saying. If there are all the judges present, and they issue that ruling based on the majority, it is a ruling, and if not, it is not a ruling. Amar Yehoshua, Asara sheyoshvin badin kolar, talui b'tzava kulam pshita, hakamash melan, ta'afilu ta'amid b'fnei rabbo. With regard to a court session, Rabbi Yehoshua says, when there are 10 judges who sit in judgment, the chain, meaning the collar placed around the neck of the person is taken to his punishment is suspended around the neck of all of them, meaning they are all responsible for the decision. The Gemara asks, isn't this obvious? The Gemara answers, this teaches us that even a student before his teacher may not be silent in deference to his teacher as he bears responsibility of an erroneous ruling. Ravuna. Wow. Die. I'm going to have to do 2 parts of this one. This is a huge daf. Ki havina vergleden bij die noise is zo tonight. Tvera the communication the night in Shiba Goshu Ravi Rashi. Ki havina trefta. Le kame. Mesisa tabach mas bachasim masai kame. Amar kechin natayan Shiba Goshu. The Gemara relates of Huna when he would go out to the court to sit in judgment, he would bring 10 Tanaim, 10 people who recite Mishnayot and Braitot in the study hall. Yeah, because he's a Mora. It's not the actual Tanaim, but because people who read the works of the Tanaim. And to sit before him and serve as partners in judgment with him, he said, I do this so that we will each receive a splinter from the beam, meaning each of us will bear only a small part of the responsibility. Okay? The Gemara relates, on a similar note, Rav Ashi, when they would bring a slaughtered animal before him to determine whether or not it was a treifa, he would bring 10 slaughterers from Mata and Hasya and sit them before him while rendering his decision. He said, I do this so that we will each receive a splinter from the beam. And new Mishnah. You know what? I'm going to do part 2 because I don't know how long these things are lasting, and it's quite a thing here. So we'll just do a B part 2.